I drove to my wife's office and brought her lunch. I said to the security guard, "I'm the CEO's husband." He burst out laughing. "Man, that's a good one. I see her husband here every single day. Look, there he is right now, walking to his car." I looked over, and then I decided to play along. Before we go any further, let me ask you something. Write in the comments whether you've ever learned something about someone close to you that made you look at them with completely different eyes, and make sure you're subscribed. This story will turn everything upside down. Let's get into it. For 25 years, Mark Miller considered his marriage a good one, measured by those simple, quiet standards that never ask for proof. His appraisal firm took up 2 modest offices in a calm neighborhood outside downtown Denver, while his wife's logistics company occupied an entire floor in a glass business tower near Cherry Creek. They never had children, and that quiet sorrow had long ago been covered over by everyday routine until it no longer ached the way it once had. Veronica left at 7 in the morning and came home close to 10 at night. Mark warmed dinner for one, while reading her messages about meetings, delivery delays, and supplier problems. "Did you even see real food today, or is your day running entirely on pure enthusiasm again?" he asked. That October morning, as Veronica swept past the kitchen, buttoning her trench coat on the move. "I'll grab something from a travel mug in the car. Everything's under control. Please don't worry." "Veronica, let's be honest. A double espresso on an empty stomach isn't breakfast. It's just an aggressive liquid illusion you use to fool your poor stomach until lunch." "Well, that illusion is incredibly effective, and it saves me time in morning traffic," she called from the hallway. Then the door slammed. Mark stood over the untouched skillet of scrambled eggs, sighed, and made a decision that two hours later would split his life into before and after. He roasted chicken with rosemary and thyme, packed it carefully into a container, wrapped it in foil, bought coffee on the way, and drove across the city. In a quarter of a century, he had been to her office maybe 5 times. Veronica had long ago set the rule that work and home did not mix, and Mark had respected it with the dependable loyalty of a man who had never even thought to question it. The lobby greeted him with pale stone, polished chrome, and the cold shine of expensive order. Mark, in his corduroy jacket with worn elbows, walked up to the security desk. "Good afternoon. I'm here for Veronica Miller. I'm her husband. I just wanted to bring her a hot homemade lunch since she always works hungry." The security guard, a broad man with a badge that read Stanley, stared at him and then laughed out loud, warmly and openly, as if Mark had just told the best joke of the week. "Oh, sir, you really got me there. That was funny. I see Mrs. Miller's legal husband here practically every day. He's almost family around here by now. In fact, there he is. He just went out to his car about 10 minutes ago. And you, sorry to say, I'm seeing you here for the first time in my life. You're quite the performer." The floor did not tilt. The walls did not swim. Something inside Mark simply shifted, quietly and irreversibly, like a foundation slab moving during the first tremor underground. "Maybe you mixed up the address or the building?" Stanley leaned over the desk with genuine concern. "This business center is huge, 3 whole towers. People get confused all the time. Or maybe you're a distant relative? Came with a surprise? Let me call upstairs and check." After the incident in September, we're under strict instructions. I have to. No need to call anyone. No reason to interrupt people over a little thing like this. Mark gathered the wreckage of his face into a smile that cost more than any deal he had closed in the last 10 years. "I'm just an old family friend, I suppose." I tried to make a joke right at the door, and it didn't land very well. "Oh, well, you should have said that from the start." Stanley pulled his hand away from the phone with visible relief. For a second there, I thought I was losing my memory for faces. I was about to call the security team. You have no idea what started around here after that September thing. Instructions this thick, I swear. A tall man in a suit walked through the glass doors. The cut of that suit did not need a price tag. Stanley immediately perked up. "Good afternoon, Mr. Davis. Mrs. Miller is up on her floor. She's probably expecting you. Go right ahead. And this family friend here brought lunch. Could you take it up to her?" Victor turned toward Mark. Not a flicker of confusion, not a trace of guilt crossed his face. Only a brief, sharp assessment from a man who knew exactly whom he was looking at. "Are you here to see Veronica about something, or is this strictly a culinary matter?" His voice was soft, inviting, perfectly controlled. "Yes. I just wanted to drop off a homemade lunch before it gets completely cold. Roasted chicken with herbs. She likes it. And a cup of coffee if it hasn't lost all its warmth on the way here." "No problem. I'll be happy to take it straight to her office in perfect condition." Mark handed him the container and the cup. 2 hours earlier, he had stood barefoot in the kitchen, choosing the spices, smelling the rosemary, and imagining Veronica being pleased. Now he was giving all of it to a man beside whom he felt like a delivery driver. He should have kept the coffee for himself, if only for the sake of justice. "Thank you. It will be delivered exactly where it belongs." Victor nodded with polished courtesy, beneath which lay complete indifference, and headed toward the elevators. "If you ever decide to stop by again with delicacies, just ask," Stanley called after him. "We're always happy to help visitors find their way. Guests are welcome here." Mark walked out to the parking lot, got into his car, and sat there for 14 minutes. He checked the time on his phone afterward. Denver beyond the windshield looked the same. Yellow maples along the boulevard, traffic moving steadily. A woman with a stroller waiting at the crosswalk. Nothing had changed. That evening, Veronica came home at 9:30, dropped her bag on the entry table, kissed his cheek, and switched on the kettle with the same familiar gesture. "You know, I remembered our morning debate about the benefits of breakfast," Mark said, pretending to scroll through the news on his tablet. "And I actually stopped by your office in the middle of the day. I wanted to surprise you. I brought a container of homemade food and hot coffee." Her hand, spoon in it, froze above her mug for a fraction of a second. "You did? Seriously? Wow, that's so unexpected and incredibly sweet. I was running between meetings all day, though. I was barely in my office and didn't personally receive anything. Although, wait, Victor did mention something, but I was already rushing off and didn't really catch it. You should have called first. I would have at least come down to meet you." "Good to know. In the future, I'll coordinate visits in advance," Mark said. They discussed the weekend, watched the news, and went to bed. Veronica fell asleep instantly and deeply. Mark lay in the dark and counted. 3 years ago, Victor Davis had joined the company. 3 years of dinners, during which his name had slowly taken root in their conversations. Victor suggested a new model. Victor was easy to work with. Victor worked everything out with the suppliers, softly, gradually, until it became as ordinary as the hum of the air conditioner. The next morning, for the first time in 15 years, Mark did not go to the office. He waited until Veronica left, then opened the drawer of her home desk. The receipt was tucked into a stack of old papers. Marco's, their place, where they had celebrated their anniversary 3 years in a row. Dinner for two 6 weeks earlier. 2 entrees, 1 bottle of wine. No appetizers, no desserts. Nothing that resembled a business dinner with a client. That evening, Veronica had told him about a meeting with a client from Omaha who had flown in for one night. He studied the bank statements line by line, making pencil notes in the margins the way he had spent decades reviewing financial documents. Lunches at cafes on days when Veronica supposedly ate the food he packed at home. Gas from a station on the edge of the city, far from the office and from any of her usual routes. A $280 purchase at a bookstore on a Tuesday during working hours, though for years she had said she had no energy left to read after work. Around 2, Veronica called. "Mark, hi. How are you feeling today? You looked really unhealthy this morning." "I've been worried all day. I can't get it out of my head. Maybe you should see a doctor?" "No, I'm fine." My temples were pounding from the morning, so I decided to get comfortable and lie down in silence for a while. It's better now. "Listen, I just remembered something. That client from Omaha you had dinner with, did the contract work out?" A pause, the length of a heartbeat. "Oh, that turned into a complete mess, honestly. No, unfortunately, she chose a local firm. Can you believe it? We spent so much time on her, and at the very last moment she changed her mind. Frustrating, of course, but what can you do?" "Yes, life is full of unexpected things," Mark said. Then he hung up. With a precise motion, he put a check mark beside another line on the statement. The lies layered over one another. Veronica had even added details about the disappointment, the wasted time, as if she had drawn an entire price tag around a dinner that had never happened. Lately, she had been leaving her laptop open on the kitchen table more and more often. The screen was not locked. The notification appeared by itself. Invitation from Victor Davis. Dinner tonight. 7 o'clock sharp. The Spice Room. The restaurant where 26 years earlier, Mark had dropped to one knee and pulled out a ring. Reservation under Davis. He began scrolling through the calendar. Coffee. Every Tuesday at 8 in the morning. Dinners every other week. A spa trip 3 months ago. The same women's leadership conference, after which Veronica had brought him a fridge magnet. Plans for Saturday, the very Saturday when she had said she absolutely had to work. A parallel life, scheduled by the hour, with the discipline of an experienced executive. Mark closed the laptop and sat for a long time with both palms resting on the lid. In 2 days, the world had offered him a new lens. Through that lens, Victor Davis was not a fling, not a random temptation, not a mistake. The regularity of the meetings, the clean structure of them, spoke a language Mark understood better than any other after decades of working with documents. The language of a system. This was not infidelity. This was a fully developed second life, and he had been assigned a role in it he still could not force himself to think about. That evening, Veronica came home 2 hours earlier than usual in a black dress Mark remembered hanging in the closet with the tag still on it, because she had always said it was too dressy for weekdays. "Listen, I just had a spontaneous idea. What if we went somewhere tonight?"
Sat down in some nice place?
She appeared in the kitchen doorway with that light, slightly guilty tone that had once seemed charming to him. "Right now, let's drop everything and go. We'll give ourselves an unplanned celebration in the middle of the week. Anywhere you want. You choose." Mark sat at the table with a mug of cold tea and the open laptop. For a second, he lost the ability to speak. The calendar invitation stood before his eyes. The Spice Room. 7 o'clock sharp. Reservation under Davis. He had already opened his mouth, and the first syllable of the restaurant's name touched his tongue. But at the last instant, he rebuilt the sentence with the agility of a man swerving away from an oncoming car. "Well, since apparently we're having a sudden citywide holiday right here in one kitchen, let's try that new sushi place by the river. I've been meaning to go there for 2 years. I was just waiting for rice to get cheaper. What do you think? Oh, great idea. I've heard a ton of good things about it too. They say the sushi is phenomenal. Veronica eagerly reached for her phone and Mark mentally exhaled. One more second, and he would have named the restaurant where she was planning to meet another man. His profession had trained him to be careful with numbers, but in spy games, he was a hopeless beginner. Veronica turned the phone in her hand and frowned with theatrical regret. Wait a second. Oh my God, I'm such a scatterbrain. Listen, cancel that. I completely forgot. I have an emergency Zoom call at 9 tonight with the supplier's head office. Some kind of contract crisis. There's no way to reschedule it as much as I want to. Mark, please forgive me. I'm a terrible wife today. Let's move this culinary tour to tomorrow. I promise I'll be free. Come on, it's fine. He nodded. A crisis is a crisis. You can't fight logistics. What chance does our dinner have against global supply chains? You are pure gold. The most understanding man in the world. She kissed the air in his direction and rushed off to change. 10 minutes later, she came out in a different outfit, businesslike, but with the earrings she wore only for special occasions. Mark watched her through the kitchen window. Her car turned around and headed not toward the office, but toward the bridge over Cherry Creek. An hour and a half later, he drove past the spice room, supposedly on his way to the grocery store. Veronica's white crossover stood in the parking lot beside a dark sedan. Mark drove slowly past without stopping, and he did go to the store after all. He bought milk and bread because they really were running low on milk and bread. And even the collapse of a life did not cancel that domestic fact. 3 days later, Veronica asked him to take her winter coat to the dry cleaner. She had been asking for a week, and he kept forgetting. Mark automatically checked the pockets, as he always did before dropping anything off, and his fingers touched a smooth plastic rectangle and cold metal on a key ring, an electronic access card for an apartment complex, and an ordinary key with a tag, stamped with the complex name and an apartment number. Across town in the opposite direction from their house, they had paid off their own home 6 years earlier. Neither of them had any reason to own a key to someone else's apartment. That same day, while Veronica was at a client presentation, Mark sat in his car in the visitor lot of a quiet apartment complex. Pleasant, well-kept, the kind chosen by people who do not want to draw attention. He gripped the key ring and waited, though he did not know what for. The answer arrived in a dark sedan. Victor got out, carrying a supermarket bag and dry-cleaned clothes. He entered the building with the relaxed ease of a man coming home. 20 minutes later, he came out without the bags, got into his car, and drove away. Mark waited 5 more minutes. The access card opened the lobby door. The key fit the apartment on the 2nd floor. He had expected anything. A bare rented studio, maybe. An extended stay apartment. Something temporary, functional, and shameful. But behind the door was a home. Fully furnished, lived in, with books on the shelves and decorative pillows on the couch. Not the ones they had at home. New ones he had never seen before. On the kitchen table stood a vase with drying carnations. On the windowsill sat a cactus in a pot that said, "Do not water me. I can handle myself." He saw the photographs on a shelf in the living room. Veronica and Victor at the company Christmas party, his arm around her waist. The two of them on some southern coastline, tanned and relaxed. She wore a summer dress Mark did not recognize. Victor kissed her cheek. She was laughing, and on her left hand there was no wedding ring. The ring she never removed at home. In the bedroom, clothes hung together in one closet. His shirts on the left, her dresses on the right. On the dresser, her perfume stood beside his cologne. In the bathroom were 2 toothbrushes and the expensive face cream Veronica had supposedly stopped buying 6 months earlier. "Oh, Mark, it's too much money for regular skincare," she had said then. "There's absolutely no reason to spend on that right now." A tablet lay on the kitchen counter. Mark opened it, and for the next half hour, the appraiser inside him worked on autopilot. Folders of files, home listings under Victor's name, collections of vacation destinations, a business expansion plan for the logistics company, naming Victor as CEO and Veronica as president. Deep in the files, he found a scanned summary from a legal consultation. 2 meetings with a divorce attorney in the last 4 months. Strategy for divorce involving major marital assets. Mark read, and the lines blurred before his eyes. Preference for a home-centered lifestyle may be characterized as social isolation. Satisfactions with a small business. Lack of ambition. Contentment with a modest standard of living. Inability to match the professional status of spouse. Every quality he had believed to be part of the foundation of their marriage had been carefully turned upside down and placed into a legal folder. Mark photographed the screen, took screenshots, and left the apartment, locking the door neatly behind him. At home, he opened Veronica's laptop. The messages confirmed everything. Discussions with Victor about the timing of the transition. Emails to the attorney about preparing for inevitable changes. But the hardest blow was an email to her sister, Zoe, sent 2 weeks earlier. "Mark has become completely withdrawn. He's going through something like a crisis, but he refuses to talk. I can't sacrifice myself forever, Zoe. Victor is a wise man. He advises me to consider all options." On Saturday morning, Mark came down to the kitchen, where Veronica sat in the robe he had given her for Christmas, drinking coffee and scrolling through her phone. He placed the printouts on the table between them. Veronica looked at the papers, then at him, and on her face Mark saw not fear and not shame, something closer to relief. "How long have you been collecting this garbage, Mark? How much do you actually know?" she asked, in the business tone he had heard her use with contractors. "You know." For a full understanding of the picture, it was enough. The puzzle came together perfectly. There weren't even any extra pieces left. "Technically speaking, I now know more about your life than the IRS knows about my income." "Fine. Since the cards are on the table, let's be honest." She pushed her mug aside and folded her hands on the table. "You know, Mark, I was already planning to sit down and have a normal conversation with you sometime next month after everything had settled. Your detective methods just sped up our timeline a little." Sped up our timeline. That's a strong phrase. We lived together for 25 years, and your terminology is pure industrial logistics. It feels like we're not getting divorced. We're turning over a construction project to inspectors ahead of schedule. Veronica sighed, not with guilt, but with the irritation of a person forced to explain the obvious. "Oh, please, spare me the drama. Our marriage effectively fell apart years ago, and we both know that if we're honest with ourselves. You just stubbornly kept creating the illusion of stability and refused to notice anything around you. How many times did I suggest we travel properly, see the world? You brushed it off every time, saying you had too much work. I suggested expanding your practice, scaling it, doing something bigger, and you were warm enough, comfortable enough, and didn't want to change a thing. I talked about moving to a normal modern neighborhood, and all I heard back was how cozy and familiar it was here. Mark, you chose to stand still and grow moss, and I only have one life. I can't and don't want to stand still, do you understand? And to avoid growing moss with me, you decided to open a branch office of the family across town, complete with a personal lawyer, asset inventory, and a ready business plan for my replacement. Smart, risk diversification, straight from the textbook. Yes, that's exactly why Victor appeared in my life. She said it without defiance, more with weary directness. You know, he truly inspires me. He gives me a new kind of energy. With him, I at least feel like I'm actually living, not just existing according to a schedule. And with you I always felt safe, like I was behind a stone wall. For a very long time, I convinced myself that peace like that would be enough to make me happy. But as you can see, it wasn't. At least now I know that my habit of reading books in the evening is social isolation, that a normal stable business is lack of ambition, and that not buying Swiss watches with my last dollar is an inability to match status. Your lawyer is a genius of creative whistling, turning ordinary family life into a medical diagnosis so neatly that deserves an award. It's all in your papers, written out. I'm quoting correctly, aren't I? If you want to know, I was trying to protect you from a harsh reality you were psychologically completely unprepared for. Of course. Saint Veronica, having an affair behind my back for 2 years while drafting an estimate for dividing the property. Pure care for my peace of mind. You practically saved me from the cruel truth. Veronica tapped her fingers on the table in that familiar rhythm that meant she had already calculated 3 possible directions for the conversation. Let's stop this pointless argument. Look, Victor and I are planning to make our relationship official closer to New Year's. A small, quiet ceremony for close friends. And I sincerely hope we can organize the smoothest, most civilized transition possible without courts or scandals. Mark, if we put emotions aside, you'll be much better off without me. That's the truth. You'll have your beloved firm, your books, your usual quiet routine. No one will pressure you or demand that you meet some standard. In your quiet little pond, you'll probably be even happier than you were with me. All right, I won't ruin your holiday preparations. Monday morning, I'll find myself a lawyer with teeth just as sharp as yours. Let them entertain each other and measure their ambition. Mark stood up from the table. I'm truly sorry it turned out this way, Veronica said. And in her voice was that polite, detached sadness people use when announcing the closure of an unprofitable branch. Mark left the kitchen and stopped in the hallway when he heard her dialing a number. Veronica's voice changed instantly. It became alive, warm, filled with an energy that had not appeared for even 1 second in their conversation. Hello, Vic. Hi. Listen, it's done. He knows. He saw the papers on the table. No, it's fine. Surprisingly calm. No shouting, no breaking dishes. So we can speed up the document process. No, I'm telling you, he wasn't angry at all. He's just, well, you know exactly what he's like. Yes, of course. All right, kisses. I'm waiting for you. Mark sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall for a long time. The woman who had once loved him, if she had ever truly existed, was gone. Over 25 years, he had failed to notice how someone else had taken her place. Someone capable of accepting his care every evening while building a replacement mechanism with the precision of an operational plan. On Monday morning, Mark sat in the office of Anthony Morgan, a divorce attorney he had crossed paths with on property appraisal cases. Instead of the usual chaos of documents, Mark placed a structured dossier on the desk, with neat rows of colored plastic tabs visible along the edge of the folder. Anthony opened it, lifted his glasses, and stared at the orderly dividers. Each category of marital expenses had been labeled by hand with painful precision. Restaurants, ours. Restaurants, not ours. Surprise apartment. The attorney silently turned pages for about 3 minutes, studying the charts, then leaned back in his chair and shook his head. Mark, in 25 years of practice, I've seen all kinds of things. My clients usually bring wrinkled receipts in a grocery bag. You're the first person whose divorce file is organized better than my own firm's annual report. Are you an auditor by any chance? An appraiser. I'm just used to debit and credit matching, even when the credit walks off to another man. Well, you've appraised your marriage thoroughly. Anthony removed his glasses and wiped them with the edge of his tie. Her strategy relied on you knowing nothing and coming to court unprepared. The fact that you found all this before the petition was filed makes it a different game, a completely different one. How different? She intended to present you as closed off and lacking initiative. And you brought me 25 years of a flawless work record, a stable business, and proof that your money was used to maintain another man's apartment. Under Colorado law, that's potential dissipation of marital assets, wasting shared property against the family's interest. That's serious, Mark. Mark nodded and moved the spreadsheets closer. Numbers spoke for themselves. Veronica made about $450,000 a year. Mark made about $180,000. But the total shared expenses over the last year had exceeded her annual income by nearly $20,000. For 3 years in a row, he had deposited $7,000 a month into their joint account, leaving himself $2,500 for everything else, thinking they were building a shared future. In reality, that account had been paying rent on the apartment across town, dinners, and gifts for her deputy. The woman who called my firm a little office lived off that little office for 3 years, Mark observed, with the dry irony of a man who had finally balanced the books. That is your strongest card. Anthony closed the folder carefully. File for divorce. I'll take the case. But before filing, Mark made a call that was harder than anything else. Russell Shaw, chairman of the board of the logistics company, picked up on the third ring. Mr. Shaw, this is Mark Miller. We've met at company events. I remember you, Mark. What happened? Mark laid out the facts, only the corporate ones, without unnecessary drama or complaint. Unauthorized transfer of authority to the first deputy. Distribution of responsibilities without board approval. Practical preparation for a leadership change of which the board had not been informed. Russell listened without interrupting, and his questions became shorter and sharper with every minute. By the end of the call, he said, "I'm ordering an unscheduled review. Thank you for calling." Mark set the phone down and leaned back in his chair, staring at the frozen screen. Imagine that. For 25 years, he had called people of that level only to wish them happy birthday or politely ask whether anyone needed a property appraisal. And today, in 5 minutes, he had managed to expertly blow apart his own wife's career. Progress. What else could you call it? That evening, Veronica stormed into the house so hard the front door slammed against the stopper. You called Shaw. She stood in the entryway without even trying to take off her coat. For the first time in all of this, her voice carried not cold calculation, but real panic. The board ordered an emergency review. Do you even understand what you've done? Without lifting his eyes, Mark calmly pressed the button on the electric kettle on the kitchen counter. I stated facts. The board makes the decisions. You're destroying everything I've achieved, she cried. Years of work, my reputation. You just took all of it, and the kettle boiled, by the way. Mark interrupted with the same unshakable calm, taking down a second cup. Would you like tea? Or do you have another emergency supplier crisis, and tea doesn't fit the schedule? That domestic, mocking calm seemed to nearly choke Veronica with rage. Red blotches spread across her face. Restructuring is a normal corporate process. she snapped. "There's nothing illegal about it. Restructuring in favor of your romantic partner without the board of directors knowing. That is not a normal process. That's a conflict of interest." Veronica fell sharply silent. Then she asked in a different voice, quieter, much more careful, "What needs to happen for this to stop?" "Nothing. You started this when you decided to live a double life. Now all of us are dealing with the consequences." She stood in the middle of the entryway, and Mark could see that for the first time in a quarter of a century, she had absolutely no idea what to say. Not because she had run out of words, but because none of her usual scripts of manipulation worked anymore. The next morning, he filed the petition in court. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Mark kept the house he had effectively paid for all those years. Veronica received her share of the savings, reduced by the same sums spent maintaining her parallel life, which the court officially recognized as dissipation of marital assets. Thunder rolled through the company. The internal review did not find anything criminal, but the facts it uncovered were enough for leadership to completely revise the staffing structure. The details of that cheerful day were later recounted to Mark with obvious pleasure by their mutual acquaintance, Karen Olson. Can you imagine? Victor Davis came to work that day in a gorgeous new suit. Apparently, he was counting on a promotion. He strutted around like an eagle, and instead of a promotion, they handed him a cardboard box for his personal things right in the office. By the way, Stanley, the security guard, helped him carry all that junk out to the car. The very same Stanley who turned you away at the front desk. He walked him to the parking lot, sighed sympathetically, and said, "So, it turns out you're not the husband after all. Well, things happen. City of contrasts." In short, Veronica was not fired, but she was put on a very short leash, probation period, reduced authority. A new chief operating officer assigned to approve every step she took. From the queen of the holding company, she became an employee, watched more closely than an intern. Returning the keys to that rented apartment across town also turned into a cinematic scene the former lovers would remember for a long time. They arrived to hand the keys back to the landlord. Victor, wrapped in an expensive cashmere coat, stood gloomily in the parking lot and irritably directed movers hauling out their things. At one point, a huge box containing his wardrobe slipped from one mover's hands and burst open with a crack right into a deep, dirty puddle. 3 flawless business suits, in which he had recently felt like the master of the universe, spread across the wet asphalt in a picturesque fan. Victor muttered a curse and rushed to pick them up. Veronica, who had arrived fully dressed up in snow-white pants and high heels, lunged to help, slipped on the slick edge of the curb, and sat down hard in the same muddy mess. For 1 second, they both froze in that absurd pose in the middle of the filth. He with a soaked couture sleeve, she with a huge dark stain halfway up her back. The movers demonstratively turned toward the truck, desperately trying not to laugh out loud. The apartment complex security guard, watching the performance from his booth, quietly remarked to his partner, "They were a beautiful couple. Shame the exit doesn't look as impressive as the entrance." Veronica stood up by herself, sharply pushed away Victor's offered hand, and locked herself in the car without a word. Victor remained in the parking lot, holding a dripping woolen disaster in his hands, looking like a man whose career, dignity, and clean clothing had all ended at the same time. When those details reached Mark, he only smiled inwardly. Life appraises more accurately than any expert. Victor eventually left for another city, taking random contract work at small companies. His great love with Veronica lasted exactly 6 weeks after he moved. Once the adrenaline of secret meetings disappeared, it turned out there was nothing behind it that could support an ordinary working Tuesday. Mark stayed in his house, but now that house finally breathed with comfort. He could read quietly in the evenings without feeling that his silence irritated someone. Valerie, a quiet, perceptive woman introduced to him by friends, came into his life without unnecessary ceremony. She was not looking for a great leader in him. She simply valued his steadiness. One evening, she settled into the armchair across from him and, looking over the bookshelf, noticed a worn volume with an odd binding on the lower shelf. "What kind of treasure is that?" she asked. "A cookbook," Mark said. The only thing Veronica forgot to take during the divorce. Apparently, she doesn't need to cook anymore. She has delivery now. "Well, that's perfect," Valerie said with a smile. "That means the book went to the person who actually uses it. By the way, do you really read every evening?" "I do." "Is that a problem?" "It's happiness." She adjusted the throw blanket. "My late husband used to read out loud. Sometimes I miss that sound, the sound of someone nearby simply turning pages." Mark turned the page a little louder, and Valerie laughed softly. In late spring, his ex-wife's name appeared on his phone screen again. Her voice sounded surprisingly dull, without its usual force and hidden strategy. "Mark, I wanted to apologize. I know it's late, and I know you have every right to hang up." "I'm listening." Victor and I ended almost immediately. It turned out that without all the secrecy, we simply had nothing to talk about over breakfast. "Strange," Mark said. "You had such a detailed business plan for your life together. Wasn't there a column for breakfast topics?" After a long, tangible pause, Veronica said quietly, "Have you become crueler?" "No, I've become more accurate." "Occupational hazard. Probably," she sighed. "I destroyed something real for what turned out to be a cheap stage set. Even now, I'm talking about what I lost. Yes." "You're still thinking only about your own losses, Veronica, not about what you did to me." "You're right," she admitted after a moment of hesitation. "You're absolutely right. I think I just don't know how to do it any other way." "Have you met someone?" "Yes. Her name is Valerie. She's kind, honest, and she knows how to live without turning a relationship into a large-scale business project." Silence hung on the line again, but this time without its former weight. "You deserve that, Mark," Veronica said with surprising sincerity. "I mean it. I wish you luck." He gently placed the phone on the table, went into the kitchen, and put on the kettle. Outside the window, the Denver evening filled with that particular May light, when the sun has already gone down and soft twilight is just beginning to settle over the rooftops. Valerie was coming in an hour. They had agreed to cook something together, improvised from whatever was in the refrigerator. Mark opened the door, critically assessed the contents of the shelves, and decided that chicken breast, fresh vegetables, and a good mood would make an excellent dinner. After all, cooking for someone who is genuinely happy to see you is one of the simplest forms of love. And maybe that's the lesson here. Betrayal can take years to build, but dignity can begin the moment you stop pretending not to see the truth. Tell me in the comments what you would have done in Mark's place, and whether you've ever had to rebuild your life after someone broke your trust. If this story moved you, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you don't miss the next story.